Chariot Racing by Cyrus and Zahi. Chariots were very light so they could go fast as possible. They were made of wicker and leather. While racing, a charioteer would tie the reins around his waist and have a knife always accessible in case he had to cut himself free in an emergency. Whenever a chariot crashed, the crowd would yell out, "Naufragium," which means shipwreck in Latin. Most chariots were pulled by an unprotected horse, 2 for a biga, a 2-horse chariot, and 4 for a quadriga, a 4-horse chariot. As many as 12 teams ran in each race. The officials would start the race by dropping a white cloth on the ground. This was called the mappa. Chariots would complete 7 circuits around the track. These were marked by dolphins because they were sacred to the god Neptune, or otherwise known as Poseidon. Although chariot races were held other places, most chariot races were held at the Circus Maximus. Some charioteers began when they were still children, and many champions were still in their teens. The 4 main factions that competed were red, green, blue, and white. The circus represented the cosmos, and every aspect of the hippodrome was symbolic. The obelisk on the Spina, central island, represented the sun. The water of the Euripus canal in the Spina represented the sea. The racetrack itself represented the earth around the sea. The 4 faction colors represented the 4 seasons. Red was summer, blue was autumn, white was winter, and green was spring. The laps the horses had to run represented the days of the week. The 12 kekares, starting gates, represented the months of the year. The 24 races held per day represented hours of the day. And yes, Romans divided their days into 24 hours too. Once the race began, charioteers were allowed to try and knock people off their chariots in order to win, causing severe injury or, in worst case scenario, death. The charioteer, or even the horse, who had won over 1,000 races was called the miliaris. There were usually 24 races every day that during the 4th century would take place on 66 days during the year. Chariot racing was very popular in ancient Rome. It was even more popular than gladiatorial combats. Chariot racing was not held every day, only on special occasions or during festivals. In the stadium, the poor people would get free seats. The rich would pay for shaded seats. Chariot racing quickly became the most popular sport in ancient Rome and was added to the Olympics. In the Olympics, there were both 4-horse and 2-horse races. Maximus was an imperial box that was directly connected to the imperial palace. In the beginning, the Romans borrowed chariot racing from the Etruscans, who borrowed it from the Greeks. Not only did the Romans keep details of the famous charioteers, they also kept details on names, breeds, and pedigrees of famous horses. Like many other aspects of the Roman world, chariot racing was continued into the Byzantine era. And for the final fun fact, by 77 BC, the rivalry between the red and the whites was already developed. There were many rivalries in chariot racing, but this was the most important. For our 10 Latin terms that have to do with chariot racing, we chose the spina, which is the central divider. a carcarace, which was the starting gate, a bigo, which is a 2-horse chariot, a quadrigo, which is a 4-horse chariot, factiones, which were companies/factions or teams, the mappa, which was a white cloth used to signal the start of the race, a circus maximus, where most of the chariot races were held, a curriculum, which is a track in which charioteers raced on, aurigo, which means to drive, and palavinar, which is the imperial box. Here's a little quiz to make sure you are paying attention. Question number 1. What are chariots made of, and why? Question number 2. What are the Latin terms for the 2-horse chariot and the 4-horse chariot? Question number 3. What did the Romans call someone who won over 1,000 races? Question 4. How many circuits would racers complete, and what were they marked by? Question 5. Who did the Romans borrow chariot racing from?